This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1069, Book of the Month Club, Spider-Man Maximum Clonage.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to Comic Shenanigans. This is episode 1069. This is our Book of the Month Club on Spider-Man Maximum Clonage. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. I'm joined, as always, by my Spider Bros, Paul Skorez and Nathan Struck. If you could both say hello to the fine people out there.
Hi.
Hello, fine people.
I'm Nathan.
Oh, they know you. So
Okay.
today we're talking
The other
about
clone.
we're talking about Maximum Clonage, which is I think Glenn Greenberg is referred to it as the nadir of the Clone Saga, and definitely not the high point. That's for sure, damn sure. And he's had a lot of negative things that he said over in the Life of Riley archives over 2 decades ago. But it's not generally fondly looked upon. But before we talk about it, we're going back to June 1995. So I like to give us a context as to what was hot in pop culture at the time. So some game releases from June 1995 to arcades everywhere. You had Tekken 2 and Street Fighter Alpha got released. If you had a PC, you also got Flight Unlimited and Star Trek TNG: A Final Unity. Never heard of either of those games.
Yeah, I don't know. I've played some Star Trek adventure games and some Star Trek like spacefaring, but I don't know that one.
Okay. And then over on the Billboard Top 100, what were people listening to? It was Have You Ever Really Loved a Woman by Bryan Adams was number 1. Then rounding out the top 5, we have This Is How We Do It by Montel Jordan, I'll Be There For You and You're All I Need by Method Man featuring Mary J. Blige, Total Eclipse of the Heart by Nikki French, and Water Runs Dry by Boyz II Men. The box office for June 1995.
That's the top 5. This is Casey Kasem.
The top 10 movies for June 1995. We have Batman Forever was number 1. Then we had Congo, Pocahontas, Casper, Bridges of Madison County, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Braveheart, Crimson Tide, Forget Paris, and While You Were Sleeping. And what was on sale at comic book shops? I'm glad you asked, although you didn't really ask. We had X-Men 43, which was the descent of Avalon. It was crashing down to Earth, and so the X-Men were trying to survive, or really it's Cyclops and Jean. It's going to lead into a great issue, I think, 1 or 2 later, which has that great cover of Cyclops just blasting everything. Very cool red cover. We got What If number 76, which was actually Spider-Man focused, which was, I think it was What If Peter Parker had to fight Spider-Man. We had Venom Super Special number 1, which we've actually already talked about on this podcast, which was still part of the Planet of the Symbiotes because it took months to unravel. We have Uncanny X-Men 323, as was building up the Gene Nation threat, which would be culminating in 325. We have the first trade paperback I remember ever buying, came out in June 95, which was Spider-Man Clone Genesis, which was the original Clone Saga. It was a good time for them to put it out because they have the clone running around in the Marvel Universe, so let's put out a trade. A book we're going to be talking about on the next episode, or at least the next Clone Saga Book of the Month Club, which is Spider-Man The Lost Years, number 1 came out, which is probably one of the best things to come out of the Clone Saga. We have Ruins number 1, which was a miniseries that came out by Warren Ellis, but the patterning, the way that it was kind of designed, and the graphics were meant to make you think that it was a sequel to Marvels, which would have come out the year before by Alex Ross. It has nothing to do with Marvels, but if you look at the cover, you'd think it would. And then we also have a lot of Disney books were still being published at the time. You had Disney's Beauty and the Beast, Disney's Pocahontas, Disney's Aladdin, and Disney's The Little Mermaid. I have no recollection of any of these books having ongoings, but there they were because it was the 90s and everything got a comic book. So that's what's the context as to what was going on in the Marvel Universe and also, in pop culture at that time. Any thoughts before we jump into Maximum Clonage?
I'm surprised there aren't more video games that I recognize from that era. I know Street Fighter Alpha is a really noteworthy game. I guess it's just the month, right? We're limited by the specific month. I remember 95 being really, really strong for video games overall, so my picture isn't fully painted yet, and I'm surprised at actually how fragmented my memory is. Speaking of fragmented memories of clones, am I a clone of the original Nathan, perhaps? But there was certainly a time when it would have been crystal clear for me, like what that year was like. But very interesting, because like the stuff that you're referencing to me was like a lot of teen pop culture knowledge, like what video games were being played, and we were talking about some other comic books at the time, which I guess, teens to young adults, the new music of the time. And then the people writing these comics, though, these are like young boomers for the most part, who are not necessarily engaged in the same pop cultural kind of milieu. And you can see it too, like as these characters that are ostensibly young, them trying to kind of shoehorn slang into it sometimes and make vague references to video games, but like the references are very broad, and like the Jackal's like, I played like a video game, but it's like an Atari reference or something like that. So it is kind of an interesting thing to like have this youth culture thing and reading characters in my youth, and yet going back and looking at this again, in a way this is very 95, but not my 95, right? It's got the grunge kind of feel in a lot of ways, but other than that, and grunge really is the early 90s anyway. It's just an interesting, it's almost like so much of the Marvel creators are picking up off of the Image creators, who were largely actually quite young and actually more in that, that zeitgeist. And this is a mirror mimic of that. So it's not even true grunge, what we're going to get into. So this story, I'm sure we're going to lambast to some point, is truly a clone in many ways. It's not a fabrication.
That's right. Well, speaking of video games, so games that would have already come out by this point in 95 include Chrono Trigger in March 95.
There you go.
Which is a big one. Kirby's Dream Land for Game Boy was also March that year. Mega Man 7 for SNES would have come out that year. Mortal Kombat 3 came out in April. Super Bomberman came out in April. The LucasArts classic Full Throttle came out in late April that year, which would have been a DOS and Mac game at the time. And then later in the year, you do have the release of Castlevania Dracula X, King of Fighters 95, Comic Zone, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, Command and Conquer. The first Command and Conquer comes out. The first Rayman comes out. So a bunch of stuff comes out later in the year, including like Star Wars TIE Fighter, Twisted Metal, Donkey Kong Country 2, The Dig, I remember from LucasArts. So a lot of stuff is coming in that year that just... not in the summer. There was no real big summer releases.
No, but Chrono Trigger would have been, I mean, what a thing, eh? What a game. Paul's nodding. He's muted, though.
Legendary game still stands up, like, today as one of the all-time best games. Like, and people still, like, you have third-party, it's not third-party, but you have, like, indie developers, like, building their RPGs based on some of the fundamentals of what Chrono Trigger was all about, so, yeah.
All right, so let's talk maximum clonage. So on the docket here, so one of the first things that really kind of is not really important at all, but in terms of chronology, it's there, is Spider-Man: The Jackal Files. I don't know if you guys actually read it. It meant a lot to me as a kid because I would have been 11 years old. Haven't read a lot of Spider-Man, and I had sporadic issues here and there. But I remember getting this on like a trip to Niagara Falls once with my babysitter, because she was a close friend of the family. So me and my sister went with her, and I remember picking that up. And I think last year's #1, and I loved getting quick sound bites and who these characters were, but through the perspective of the Jackal. Looking at it now, it's very much fluff. Like it's not really consequential at all. But I liked it at the time, and it had a bit of a framing sequence, which was, just downloading stuff into Spider-Side's brain. And just wanted to know if there was any particular pages you liked, any commentary from the Jackal that you liked, or any of the, the specific kind of pinups that you thought was particularly good.
I hated all the pages because I could barely read the text over top of the ridiculous background they printed it on. Holy crap, this was hard to read. It's like physically hard to read.
That is true.
My God.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening here. No, look, like, obviously, yeah, there's some cool pinup art. It's a very interesting balance between, like, reading, for lack of a better term, tech specs, right, and basic hero stuff, but kind of from the Jackal's perspective, and, like, but do you really know this much detail for some of these characters and individuals? It doesn't quite fit right? So it's interesting from a sense that it's kind of basically a bio book to get you into the cast of what's going on, but I don't quite buy that the Jackal is as in tune of who Eddie Brock and Cleese Cassidy and a lot of these characters kind of come from. I did enjoy kind of the web shooters and the technology piece of it all was kind of neat to see. So, because I guess he would have had to have reverse engineered them for the clone to use when he threw a costume on him. I don't know, right? So like fascinating.
That's a really good question, actually. Like, right? Yeah, because the clone did have web shooters in that first issue back in Amazing Spider-Man 149. Did he use webs, or did they just tussle with each other? He definitely has webs afterwards, where in that story where he go back to his house and he finds Peter making out with Mary Jane, and he's like, "Whoa!" He definitely had webs there. So you're right. I guess he did figure out how to do all this. Right, he could do everything.
Mastered web fluid. I don't know. And it's kind of funny too. Like the one super vague character no one knows shit about is the Scryer, and it's all in one word. Right? Are you kidding me? The one guy I could use some bio shit on, no. He's enigmatic. That's it.
He knows nothing.
Okay. Thanks, Jackal. Thanks for nothing.
Well, it's interesting too because the Jackal in story was in the tank the entire time. He was in that cryo tank, getting better and improving his body. So how did he even come out to learn stuff? A lot of this was he's not he was around making notes. He was in this weird regeneration tank. So some of it's I don't think he would know any of this.
Well, I mean, none of this story makes almost any sense anyway. Everything is it feels like a retcon on a retcon and half baked. I am looking though through the issues of Maximum Clonage about spoilers for something that's 35 years old or whatever. But none of the clones in that get dropped basically on Ben that he fights this giant room of clones. Mm-hmm. None of them seem to shoot any web fluid, so at least they don't have web shooters. Perhaps
interesting.
But I can't remember the 70s story to remember if he used web shooters. My answer to your question, Adam, is the picture of Kane is really cool.
Oh, yeah?
I like Kane, as ridiculous as his costume is and as impossible as it is to kind of draw in a real sense. Mm-hmm. And Paul and I are excited for the upcoming potential Marvel Legend release for him, because that would be a problem in many ways for the designer to make a 3D version of this, but maybe they'll make it great.
It's interesting. I would say that Kane is actually the worst of the Patrick Zircher pieces here. Zircher did 3 pieces in this one shot, and that was the one I was most let down by.
I like it. I just I like it. What are the other ones that
he did? He did the New Warriors, and he was the regular artist at the time, so it makes sense he would have done that. And I believe I don't love this shot of them. I feel like his work in the comic is better, but to each their own. And what's the other one? He did the Black Cat.
Yeah, I don't vibe with those as much. I don't know. Maybe whatever. The TNA with MJ and Gwen, again, silly. And the more they sexualize Gwen, it's just I don't know. For some reason I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't know why. It's different for MJ. It's not always great for MJ, but I guess she's a model. I don't know. But I don't love the art in this for the most part. So yeah, this is something if I had leafed through on the stand, I probably would have put back down.
One piece I thought was pretty impressive was the Mark Buckingham piece, which is the Scarlet Spider. That's a sweet Scarlet Spider, and I would not have thought that was a Buckingham. If I covered up his name, I would have thought this was almost like a Lyle or something like that. It's actually a really nice piece. And even the Spider-Man is by George Perez, which I would not have pegged that as a Perez either.
No, it's overwrought by the buildings, by the deep blacks of the buildings. It almost swallows up the art.
Yeah. And I guess one of note, just because I like his art in general, is the Scryer is by Pat Olive, who's a friend of this show. And it's funny, when I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I can see the Pat Olive. When I just kind of flip through it, it's just that's just a Scryer face. But when I look at it now, I'm like, that's very much the facial, how he makes faces look, the facial detail.
Easiest commission ever, this piece right here.
It's got a deep V.
Deep V, yeah.
Okay, I think I'm coming around on the Black Cat. I like the scratching of the posts and the little cats in the background. There's actually quite a bit of detail here that is nice. Paul's absolutely right though about like the decisions in the 90s, like the fan magazines. I remember there was a whole thing about the Generation X TV series, or sorry, not TV series, the movie. And remember reading, trying to read up on it, and this era in the 90s of them throwing together these very busy, sometimes partially CG generated blobs of color, and then putting text, sometimes just black text on a dark background, and going good luck. I'm glad we've moved on from this era, but it was so extreme, I guess, at the time that it was almost postmodern, like an anti-design in a way.
That's right.
It's too busy.
So I'll move on from the one shot unless you have any other thoughts. All right.
Nope.
I've already moved on. We can go.
You've moved on. All right. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on this one per se because it really doesn't make a huge difference. But we got New Warriors 61, which is the Maximum Clonage prologue. So a little bit of background. This is right around the time that New Warriors officially moved offices. So it was now going to be edited through the Spider office. So that's why this kind of happened. And they're like, okay. They asked if they could use Scarlet Spider, and they're like, "Yeah, put him on the team. Like that's fine." And so Tom Brevoort was the editor. Glenn Greenberg was the assistant editor. They knew that by being part of the Spider office, they could have synergy and hopefully spike up their sales by being involved with the Spider-Man Clone Saga. So that was perceived as a positive. So if you read that issue with that perspective, I think the issue actually works better because when I first read it, I'm like, this isn't great. There's just a lot of stuff happening, and there's a lot of like intro to the characters in terms of what we're currently dealing with. But if you think about it as a lot of people who may not have been reading New Warriors, they're going to pick this up because it's connected to the Clone Saga, because it's part of that storyline. So this is a good way of trying to give people a taste of what the New Warriors were at this point in time. So there's a lot of like, they're getting used to their headquarters. There's a lot of interplay between some of the New Warriors, and you're really trying to understand who they are. So I think as an intro and introduction to who these characters are, I think it works. As a Maximum Clonage tie-in, it's tangential at best. It's not great, but what are your thoughts?
I like Zerker, so his art for me makes it flow a bit better. There's a particular panel that I really enjoyed where Speedball is bursting into, I don't know, this facility or whatever, and here it is. I can't tell you the page number because this collection has no page numbers, but for the boys looking at at my screen, there's some really nice shattering wood and stone, and a great job of Robbie there. So there were enough panels that made me really appreciate him. Because I enjoy his work elsewhere. Other than that, I guess I'm mostly invested in Firestar and the story that's building here about that will eventually become her storyline about getting cancer from all the microwaves that she fires out of her body. But yeah, she goes with her friend, drops her friend off at work, and a guy that sexually assaulted her comes in and orders a burger, and she's like, leave him alone, it's not worth it. And Angel's just like, no, this guy can't get away with it. And she microwaves his burger, and she's super mad, and they have this conversation about it. So there's lots of drama here. And then again, her friend's just like, yeah, I wish you wouldn't use that power around me. You could be giving folks cancer or making them sterile or something. Do you ever think about that? Lots of interesting emotions in people's faces by Zerker, and then she flies away. So that kind of stuff, if this was my first New Warriors book, I think that would draw me in enough to kind of go, hey, I want to see what happens next. So there was enough. The stuff that actually is the least interesting to me is the Spider-Man stuff in this issue.
What I'm interested
Yeah, I'm with you, Nate, that sequence there in the small cafeteria was probably the most powerful part of it. Although, to reference it as being date raped, surprised me. It was oh man, that's pretty strong text, And obviously this happened in a previous issue. Not that I want to go back and witness what may have happened here, but it's a pretty strong thing to write in comics in this era, I guess, especially for the targeted audience. I'm kind of surprised that text kind of made it through. There's a few different ways you probably could have still have gravitas to what happened as some type of attack or something, but that seemed pretty pretty harsh, I guess. Yeah, and the art here is a lot of fun. Like, it's not like it's an ugly book to look at. And then this author goes pretty quick with all these weird mutates that they fight towards the end here, and we'll see where it goes. Justice is a bit of a dick in this, I think. Interesting introduction to him as a character.
Well, actually, Richard Rider's kind of a dick, Paul. Like, Richard Rider does not...
He was a big, yeah, massive douche when he's talking to this poor Hindsight down here. I don't know if he's just being, like, super bitter because he doesn't have powers right now, whatever happened to him. But, yeah, him with the man bun ponytail action, like, oof. Not the Richard I know, or know fondly thanks to Annihilation and stuff, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
He's all, like, jacked with, like, a mulleted ponytail, and then there's, like, this illusion or the metaphor about him having, like, being impotent, right? Like, he doesn't have his powers, and so this is, like, emasculated kind of storyline, and he's always just angry and roided up. Always slamming too many roids. Get off the juice, Rich. Get your powers back,
Yeah.
Like a Joe pill. And then Turbo, her storyline, not interesting. Like, oh, I'm switching costumes with this other guy, and we're trying to make the costume change from blue to black, and he can't make it change from blue to black, but I can. I'm like, cool.
Who cares? Yeah.
Yeah.
Dipping in water, you can change colors. Who cares, right? Like, yeah, just
yeah, exactly. Whereas Speedball, he has a mystery, right? Oh, someone knows he's Speedball, and they're giving him a call, and like, oh, I know stuff. Like, that could be interesting. So at least there's a few mysteries here, enough characters that it has me intrigued.
Mm-hmm. Plus, his powers are a little on the fritz, right? Like, he doesn't mean to suddenly be ping-ponging around his house at all. It's something happens by accident, and that is a building storyline at that point in time. They really
lost the opportunity to build towards a storyline, Adam, by not having him say, "Oh no, I damaged the living room. I'll do some penance for that." Yeah, that's right. Do some scaffolding for a storyline that wouldn't come into creations for 20 years after this or whatever.
No, I know Firestar is a mutant. Is people a mutant too?
No.
No, Astrovic is, right? Isn't it? It's Vance and Angel who are?
Correct. Yeah, he got his powers some other way. I can't remember exactly how. It's interesting also, like, this is a moment when a member of the Power Pack is part of the team. It's also interesting that Zerker, I don't think he does, like, younger teenagers very well, because the characters definitely looked younger when it was under Bagley. And now they look like Spider-Man's age, but they should be younger than Spider-Man, but they look as old as Spider-Man.
Yeah, like, it's a very teenage job going to work at the equivalent of McDonald's, right? But you would think they look college age, yeah.
So we got, now, any other final thoughts about New Warriors?
No, I'm good.
No. So we got Maximum Clonage Alpha. So apparently this was originally a joke. In the office, they were joking that we should call it Maximum Clonage, and a lot of people were like, So apparently around the office, when Maximum Carnage happened, they called it Maximum Garbage. And then...
Oh, snap.
And in the office, because they didn't really, like, some people didn't like it. And then when this was happening, they called it Maximum Bonage. Because they just, because they didn't like what was happening. This was supposed to be the end of the Clone Saga. This was supposed to be the end. It was going to be 4 issues, really? And then it was going to be in Spider-Man Unlimited, the quarterly book, and that's how they were going to end it. Then marketing said, actually, we did this thing called Age of Apocalypse last year, and we had an Alpha issue and an Omega issue, and they had foil, and they sold like gangbusters, so we're going to do that instead. So now suddenly they had to have a prologue issue, 4 issues, and then they were going to do this special. Now, the problem was they gave the job to writing Omega to the guy who was the writer of the quarterly book. And that's a lot of heavy lifting for what's supposed to be the last chapter of the Clone Saga. They gave it to a very inexperienced writer, which was Tom Lyle. Tom Lyle was not a very experienced writer at this point. He was doing a few issues here and there of Spider-Man Unlimited. Suddenly, he's the one who has to, land the plane. And he can't do it. And also, they basically take the rug out from under him and say, we're not going to land the plane after all. So most of Omega is written by committee. It went through a lot of rewrites. You have multiple artists. It's a mess. At least Alpha is a little bit more consistent. It's got, it's not nearly as haphazard as you would get later on in Omega. But still, this is where it all really goes off the rails, because so many questions. Like, why is Jackal suddenly like this? He's like, I'm going to kill everybody and replace everyone with clones. What is happening? Like, it's just, it goes so big so fast. And they also, like, murder, 2,000 people in the first page? Like, it's just pandemonium. This guy makes, like, Carnage look like garbage, apparently. Like, this guy's just a genocidal maniac. Nate, please.
Everything you just said is exactly what Alan Moore hates about comic books these days, or even back those times, right? Like, everything. Editorial interference, emphasis on covers and MacGuffins, and just, nothing is at the service of the story. The story is only at the service of the dollars. No artistry. This guy, Todd DeZago, never heard of this guy. None of the characters most of them don't sound like themselves. Actually, quite literally, Peter and Ben will switch personalities in a split second. So that the scripting is terrible. It's nice to see that Tom DeFalco is involved somehow, but none of Tom really comes through for me here.
No, he's just doing the plot. I will say, in defense of Todd DeZago, actually a great writer. But he's very green. He's very green. He's doing, he's being enlisted at the, to kind of do this scripting. He's not really in control of anything. Again, he's working with editorial. I would say this is not necessarily DeZago's fault. It's definitely not his best. I would say he does a highly acclaimed run on Sensational Spider-Man with Mike Wieringo, which is highly loved and beloved. He does a lot of wonderful stuff.
I'm not here to put him on the slab of sacrifice. I'm not here to kind of say it's one man's fault for sure. But I
think you're calling this evidence, is what you're doing.
I'm thinking slam on the table, mark of Cain. I was thinking about Aslan on the stone table. I just noticed that the scripting sounded so off. Like, there was no ear for anybody. And again, I'm not saying that it's his fault. He could have been a lamb for the slaughter. But yeah, I just noticed, I don't know this guy. I don't know the storyline you're referencing. He seemed like he came out of nowhere. And then, maybe was not given the tool set that he needed. But yeah, nothing is really firing for me for most of this. And I guess we'll get into that in a few seconds. I don't know.
Paul?
Well, I have a soft spot for the Alpha issue. I still have this shiny, gorgeous cover. Take it or leave it. This is a beautiful piece to have. It has this kind of sheer, transparent overlay. Then you flip it, then you have Ben and Kane underneath it. I think I showed it to Nate last time he was over. It from a marketing standpoint, it suckered me into it, right? Because I thought it was a beautiful looking book. From cover.
How much money it cost?
At the time?
Do you have it nearby?
No, I'd have to.
Okay, I'm going to try Googling it.
And then I don't remember. I think I might have been kind of silly about it and never actually read the book because I wanted to keep the issue pristine because I'm a weirdo like that. And then I don't think I ever bought any of the subsequent parts of the story afterward either, because I was still back then just buying whatever. I have such a hodgepodge original collection of Clone Saga books that none of it probably makes as much sense of the whole storyline after all said and done. So thank God for the collections that can put it all together.
It was $4.95, Nate. It was $5.
$5.
$5.95.
That's US,
which is the equivalent today. That's the equivalent today of $2,500. So that's a lot of money.
But yeah, there is some fairly decent art in here. Was it Ron Lim that does this one?
Yeah. Ron Lim does. I think he does a good job for the most part. I mean, there's some. I think one of the biggest problems for me is no one really knows what Jackal's supposed to look like. His features get really exaggerated. They don't really know what he looks like. There's not really.
It's a goblin at first, and then he kind of streamlines into it. Yeah.
There's no really good model sheet for him. MJ looks decent. I mean, Scarlet Spider and Spider-Man look fine. There's nothing inherent. I would say the worst looking character is probably the survivor of the bio attack. I think they didn't really know what that guy was going to look like, so he just has very generic features, and they don't really do a good job explaining it. Now, one thing I think is so confusing with Spider Side is that, in the previous issue, Jackal was holding up the Spider-Side costume. And then in the Jackal files, they're talking about how he can just manipulate his body. And that's what he does here. But even then, he was told what he was going to look like. And here he's like, I hope Dad thinks I can look cool. And I'm like, there's 3 different like interpretations of this. No one's talking to each other. No one knows what's going on. Like, it's such a haphazard mess. I will say I appreciate the classic heroes fight heroes. At least makes more sense here as to why the New Warriors fight Scarlet Spider, because they're, they just think that he's in the same relation. Yeah, they don't know him. Although, really, have they not picked up a newspaper? Like, Scarlet Spider's been around.
Yes.
But I guess the issue's fine. It's not great. But the biggest problem was obviously Peter. Peter goes full-on emo mode. We just got this, right? We just got, I am the Spider, Peter Parker sucks, and now it's like, I am nothing. And we already had that with Ben, which is, I guess, part of your point, Nate, that we're kind of flip-flopping, because now he's in that mode. But so much worse, and it is immediately, like, just giving himself over to the Jackal. Like, what is happening? Like, you're making me hate this character, but at least Ben's being written well, so, like, if you think about it that way, they're trying to set us up for Peter to go away and Ben to take over, and this is definitely making me want that to happen because I don't like Peter.
Yep. Yeah, it's a full switcheroo. You can see what they're doing. We want people to like Ben, and we're going to immediately establish him as the Peter Parker that you like or prefer, because we're going to carry everything over. And there's this great panel in part 6 that, can I just talk about that real quick and jump to it?
Yeah, sure.
To make this point. Okay. Near the end of part 6, they're fighting the Jackal on the top of the roof or whatever, and then this canister has got to be disposed of, right? So Ben, by the way, we're going to get to the point where they're Peter-fying Ben so much he gets battle damaged, a battle damaged costume in a very similar way that you see Peter getting his battle damage, right, with tears in the costume. Anyway, he says, "I'm going to go take care of this canister," and he says here, "You're the one with the wife, not me," which is really what Marvel's whole thing was, right? Like, we're going to be different, and I'm going to take on the story now, because the problem was Peter has a wife. So you're going to be the bad guy now. You're going to be the guy who people don't like, and you're going to be the one with the wife. And the big difference between us, with the same powers, we're basically going to have the same personality now, is that you have the wife and not me. And then he jumps into action and takes over the heroism of the rest of that storyline. Even in most of the storyline, he's the main hero anyway. And it's just like putting a fine point on it. That's the guy with the wife. We're going to transition him out, and I'm going to be Spider-Man. And it's like, it really is like the thesis of the whole thing. And it's not an organic transition. All of a sudden, Ben moves from going, not a man, I'm a clone, not a man, not even a hero, I'm nothing, to, hey, I'm all about, like, altruism, and even though MJ's beating me in the chest and saying it's all your fault, I'm going to say, no, MJ, I won't hit you like Peter does. I'm going to stop. He didn't say that, but that's kind of the scene, right? We just saw her in the storyline previously, and she goes to hit Ben, and he holds her back and goes, no. I don't even want his life. I'm such a good guy. I'm the good guy who won't take his wife, won't take his life. He's got this beautiful thing going, and I'll just kind of get back to a single boy again. And he's funny. He's making jokes. He's got an internal monologue for joke making, and Peter's jokes are all gone again, and he's back to that same thing that you mentioned. Yeah, so that quick switcheroo. And before I pause and let someone else say some very great words, yes, you're right about the Ron Lim thing. I'm not a big fan of Ron doing Spider-Man stuff. I like him much better in Silver Surfer. But this issue is not Unlimited 7. Unlimited 7, which has the most infamous of panels we talked about before that I'm going to show here on a podcast that, of course, doesn't... that classic panel from issue 7 where he's turning around and webbing and uppercutting. This is Ron pushed too far, too quick. But in Maximum Clonage, he is serviceable. He is doing some decent work.
Oh, dude, this whole flippity thing off the building into this swing pose, unbelievable, right? So good.
I also like the restraint with the panel after he's swinging away, and there's just a silent panel of him in silhouette, is it not? Just kind of off a building, if I can find it. I think this is issue 1 as well. It's before he talks to Mary Jane. He's having a whole tussle in his mind about, like, who he should be, and I got to control myself. You robbed me of 5 years. And he goes, and he said, I got to go control myself, and maybe by finding Peter, I can do just that. So he kind of pacifies his mind. There's a shot of a thwip, and then there's this great, very restrained, beautiful silent page of him just swinging out between these kind of buildings in the caverns of New York. So there is some good storytelling happening, too, here. It's not just, hoses.
I will be pedantic, because that's my want, when you have this bio weapon happen, and Jackal's on his way back to New York, but he's not in New York yet. Like, there is a distance of time, and yet he turns on the radio and finds out that someone's saying that Spider-Man's on Empire State Building. He's like, well, that's where I'm going to go. And Punisher happens to be listening, and then for whatever reason decides I'm going to go hunt Spider-Man, but really I'm looking for Jackal, but I'd have no way of knowing that. Like, it just... the contrivances are difficult to stomach at times. So are we ready to move into Web of Spider-Man?
Yeah, the
MacGuffin you just need your, classic team-up issue for Punisher, who's had zero to do with anything this entire storyline. Just needs to show up as a guest star in Web of Spider-Man number 127. Just for funsies.
I get it, because we often forget, but I mean, the Punisher first showed up being as a pawn of the Jackal. So there is a connection there. So I at least appreciate that a little bit, but at the same time, this is one of the worst renditions of the Punisher I've read. Like, first of all, Butler doesn't do a great Punisher. He looks unhinged most of the time. He doesn't look like the calm, cool guy we know. And also, the way he's written, he's talking to himself constantly. Like, what is happening? He's
not stoic.
No, and he's using, pop culture references. He's Dead Jim?
Yeah.
What?
Dead Jim, yeah.
He's making a Star Trek reference? That's not...
It's not even it's not a good reference.
No.
It's not, no.
Also, why are there all these SWAT guys showing up at the Empire State Building? Because, Jackal just got there. Spider-Man's been there for a while, and it was on the news. Okay, fine. But, why are they hunting Spider-Man? They shouldn't be. Jackal, fine, but Jackal just got there. How is this, heavily armed squad already there?
Yeah, they're concerned that Spider-Man and a guy in black are on the Empire State Building. If they ran up there every time they saw Spider-Man and a guy in black there, they'd be doing it daily. Yeah, so I feel like Randy Emberlin on inks. I just feel like Butler is not serviced by Emberlin here. I feel like Emberlin is almost taking too much control. It doesn't feel like classic Butler most of the time. It feels very different.
I feel like Butler must have had such loose pencils though, because I feel like there was nothing for him to tighten up. Especially on the Jackal. I think the Jackal looks.
It doesn't say breakdowns though. It says pencils, and if it says breakdowns,
I know it does, but he's never made the Jackal look like this before. This ridiculous. It's just. It's just not good. And even some of the musculature on Spider-Man, it's always been too much, but sometimes he'll be swinging and holding the Jackal, and he has I don't know, a 14 pack. It's so much rippling up in his body.
The tight ass right here coming at the Punisher. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that caboose.
Whoa. But and even the Jackal throwing himself in front of the gunfire, and then at the end being I planned that, didn't I? I'm so over it. It's just so cloying. The way in which Jackal is written, it's not fun, it's not entertaining, it's very cloying. It's just too much. And the Punisher, this is, again, one of the worst appearances he's ever had. He also has a code, but he threatens to, electrocute all these SWAT guys if they don't leave him alone. I just don't buy it. It just doesn't feel right. And
if I had the money, I would buy you this page, Paul. I would definitely get you the original. I know it's hard to find Clone Saga pages now. There was a time when Clone Saga pages were $1. I wish I could go back in time, and that's right, not play the stock market, get a bunch of pages for Paul, and then reveal them to him so he could enjoy the weird anatomy of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
But
I want the evidence page. If you can get me the evidence page, that would be a great addition.
That would be the one, yeah.
What's weird,
too? Very much a by the numbers, freaking, team up, gone wrong, guest star appearance thing. It really did nothing for nobody.
No. And also, it meant nothing. Punisher just leaves. He's
yeah.
Oh,
I got him. Peace.
good job.
I'm out of here. Yeah.
Good job, Frank.
Never to be seen in the saga again. Yeah.
There's one page I like, and it is the page with Kane, because I'm the Kane boy. And it's the smokestacks.
Yeah.
So you got a nice. I can't get enough of the smokestacks. The colors aren't quite as good here. I love the setting sun over the smokestacks. Love those shots, even in the 70s, really, really good. And then that's not a terrible rendering of Kane.
No.
He's got this great, close-up shot of his mask. So that's the one page for me. Other than that, I don't need anything in this.
I will say I like the last two panels of the page of the series of the issue with Peter just being completely destroyed and on the ground. I don't like what gets us there. I don't like that he puts Jackal in the pod. I really don't like any of it. But I like that emotional moment because it's not they're not adding in overwrought text. You just get to sit with the art, and I'm like, okay, that's restraint. And it's interesting, as you mentioned, Nate, DeZago ends up, doing dialogue in, 3 of these issues? So, I mean, at least there he didn't add any, but again, the dialogue in the Jackal killed it for me. I'm like, I just don't care. If he hadn't said this, I think it would have been better, because at least there's an not even an ambiguity, it's just, he tried to save Peter. He almost died. Peter puts him in the tank. I didn't need him being ho, 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 like the Jackal, sorry, like the Joker, don't you get it? I don't get it. It's stupid. So it just found that it, rankled it was insulting to my intelligence. I just didn't need that.
It's definitely more of a tell, not show moment. He's already a morally ambiguous character. He's already been a villain for so long. Do you really have to have him say, couldn't have been better if I planned it myself? Heh. Or did I?
Yeah.
Didn't I? Or did I? Or didn't I? Who are you talking to? Just let us. You're a Jackal man. You already look devious. You could have just had a little smile as he's thinking to himself, and then we can read into it, right? Instead, he tells everything. So the restraint at the end of Peter. Something's not right with Peter. We got that already, but at least they're kind of showing us here that something's not right with Peter. That storyline though gets really muddled too, right? Because Ben will later on go, "How did I believe I was the clone all these years? I'm not going to make the Jackal tell me." And he's all like, "Well, when I cloned you, I put it into your brain that you were the clone." I'm like, how does he have that power? What is that coming from? Is that genetic memory thing? And so and Peter asks the same question. He's like, "Why am I trusting the Jackal?" And that never gets answered. He's just like, "I guess we just are to assume he can just put it in your brain whenever he wants to." Mind control.
Yeah.
I'm doing jazz hands. Mind control.
So
it's lazy.
Let's move on to chapter 3. Well, actually, last thought about chapter 2. No Ben. He's not there at all. And I think the issue suffers for it. I don't know how you would have fit him in, but the next issue, we have Ben show up, but out of nowhere. Out
of nowhere, yeah.
He just shows up as "Hey, Peter, you're in this secret lab that I don't know about. I'm here."
And then, pow.
No, he followed a lead he just,
Sure.
he hears something, whispers in the alleys that the secret lab is here. Let's go check it out.
Yeah, and
the secretive lab possible.
And it's just such a mess because it's they're just there, they're just fighting each other, and it's just we've had this. This isn't new.
That's the problem. It's it's regurgitation of the slog that we've already talked about on the previous podcast. Is this whole oh, not a man. Oh, all your fault. Oh, man. We've gone through it. We're not talking to it on today's podcast. Unfortunately, there's an issue coming up where it's you have this great kind of team up issue of them just being heroes together for a while. I wish we had more of that in this rather than the constant oh, you're the real clone, I'm the real clone, blah, 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 punching in the faces and just the same brooding cycle and misdirection. And again, we go through. How many issues is this? 6 issues, 8 issues of all this, and it's man, it's all the same
beats.
Content, just kind of whittled, right? And even so someone clearly just watched Terminator 2 with the head reforming with the crystallization in the liquid, and somehow Spider-Side has these mystical Hydro-Man level powers or whatever the hell it is. I don't even know.
He can control every molecule. He's the perfect clone.
Right?
Control every molecule?
Just craziness. And, it just keeps going to, it's almost the conversation in the room, in the office, how crazy off the rails can we even go at this point? Room full of clones, let's go. jump the shark and just go bananas.
For sure. And like, I feel like also, how big is this lab? How big is this like secret bunker? Because like you have them having a fight, then you turn the corner, and now there's Spider-Side, and so now Spider-Side's fighting them, and then there's another corner, and Kane's in that other corner, and he finds.
And then Spider-Side like walks away mid-fight for no reason. I've got my 3 punches in.
Because
oh, hey,
the Scryer
guy, because the guy we know nothing about is watching, and I gotta talk to this guy. Now he touches my forehead. Now I know the truth. The truth. Oh my god!
Well, and then you have
Jesus. Like, oh my god.
You do have Jackal, and that I actually don't mind the page where it's Jackal and he's looking all triumphant, and you have all the Spider characters around him. Like that's kind of they all look good. So I mean that's a fun little page. Although again they're just kind of standing around, and again just more fighting, more punching, Ben being like, "You stole my life." Like it's just a lot, and then. Because we have to remember that things are just dumb. Spider-Side just walks away from everything else. Like Scarlet Spider is fighting Jackal, but Spider-Side leaves just to find Skryer for no reason.
Yeah, and then he just comes back mid-fight. Oh, hey, what's up, bros? I'm back. Let's talk. It's maddening how it makes no sense.
And again,
it is ironic.
Sir, go ahead, Nate, please.
It is ironic that the perfect clone has control over all his molecules, and Jackal wants to create a world where he's in complete control and replacing everyone with clones, and no one can control their emotions for like more than 2 panels. It's the irony of like everything is in perfect control. Spider-Side can't control his screaming and his bloodlust and his laughter and his walking away and his walking back and I'll kill you, Dad, and I'll love you, Dad, at all. It's a bunch of babies. It's a bunch of screaming ids. So, I mean, even this page where Kane comes in again, he's like, I'm going to kill you, Dad, and they have this fight. And he goes, but also, I'm going to turn you around on the very next page and promise you that I'm going to reverse your degeneration. And he just goes, okay. And then 2 pages later, or 4, he portrays him and says, actually, no, I lied. And then Peter, who is Kane here, is just like, what? How could you betray me? It's a condensation of the last 2 years, I'm just like, or whatever, of storytelling. I do feel that Bagley nails the pain here, though. Like, kudos to him.
Absolutely.
In these panels when he talks about, you have no idea what it feels like to hurt, to feel the pain that I feel all the time, right? So there's this load, this mental load that Kane's constantly carrying that we are reminded about, and there's a moment of pathos, and then just the zaniness happens again. And
then Kane just leaves. Okay, you dissed me hard. I'm out. Like, okay.
But,
well, even
and the last thing I'll just say is about the homoeroticism is rampant here, with pulling men soaking wet out of pods, and then the grappling and the grabbing, and then immersing each other in liquid, and then pricking necks, and then touching people gingerly on the chin and stroking heads, and I'm your dad, but not your dad, and you're my boys, and now I want you to go inside of your brother as he chokes you out and becomes water, and you break him, and you grab each other and hold each other down, and pow. Like, there's just a lot of this, like, psychosexual stuff going on here, too, which is fun, but it is very, very, very repetitive, and now we'll back off.
At the end of the issue, again, they throw Scarlet Spider into a different area of this giant underground lab, and then
this vault of clones.
And then the Jackal's just like, "You boys ready for some lunch?" I'm like, "What is happening?" Like,
I'm buying.
Like, I don't understand. And then
I want sushi. Let's go.
And then you have all these spider clones, and apparently, so Glenn Greenberg has said like. They knew, like, he hated that this happened. He's like, the minute you called it maximum clonage, he knew this was inevitable, this kind of page, and he thinks it's so stupid.
And the best part here is this panel. Look at Spider-Side's face when Jackal.
He's Deadpool. He's winking.
It sounds at times like this was written by an 11-year-old, and then the almost right before the climax, they're just like, okay, you want to go to McDonald's? And then, like, the kid is just like, I'm going to get a Happy Meal. Like, it's very 11-year-old. And this is where the connection back to Maximum Carnage comes in, right? Because Maximum Carnage has also been, like Secret Wars, is about a bunch of a kid banging their toys together, right? Just having a fight. And so it's an apt, comparison or allusion to Maximum Carnage. But it wears you down as a reader.
Yeah. The next issue again has like a lot of fighting of clones, clone on clone action. I will say, of all the variety of issues, probably has some of the best art. Like Tom Lyle does a great job. He's not given the best content necessarily. There's a lot of flashbacks here that we don't need. There's more Gwen clones that are just like degenerating all over the place, which is horrifying. We do bring back the Gwen who we saw back in Web 125, who was married to, that other version of the Jackal who died, falling from, I guess he was in the car, right? The car fell into the water when the Green Goblin saved her. She just disappeared, right? So now she's just living somewhere in New York somehow, and Jackal knows where she is, of course, and so Peter has to go, collect her. At the same time, you have, Kane dealing with MJ, and wanting to make sure that, she's protected. It's a lot. But the art is great. I will say that.
Yeah, I do like that conversation, but it's too short. It's 2 pages. It really needs to be more time. This is a good dramatic moment of like her issuing a call to action, a call to heroism to Kane, the least heroic. I mean, Spider-Side doesn't count because he's just a big blob boy. And then in these 2 pages, she just goes, "You have the power." This is the thing about Kane, right? He's so quick to just snap to, "This is evidence," or "I'll trust you, Daddy." "No, I'm betraying you now." "Oh no!" And then you're, "You have the power? Now accept the responsibility." And he's like, "Okay, smash," and just jumps out the window. He's off to the race. Now to help fight with Scarlet Spider, to help fight with Ben, he's like, "He's my lifelong enemy. I've wanted to destroy him for years. I've been following him for 5 years, and I'm not gonna." And she's like, "Responsibility." He's like, "Okay." And he's going to the races. I don't buy that transition, but we have to get him there.
But he leaves that fight to go sneak into MJ's house, have a conversation, stand right by the front door, and crash out the window, and go back to where he just was to rejoin the fight he was just at the super secret lab.
If he had a 95 flip phone, he could have just gone like, "I'm going to leave." And he could just text him, responsibility. He'd be like, "Okay, I'll stay." But instead, he had to do the 95 thing, the other thing, which is just to travel. That's what we did. We just geographically went places to have conversations with people, or you could maybe have a phone call, right? There was no...
But the over-dramatic jump out the window is what makes it for me. Like he's right by the door. He's right by the door. He just wants to know, I'm going out the window. Screw that noise. I don't do doors.
It's God. Almost. Yeah, of him doing that. Very good.
It's hilarious.
I want to ask a question to you guys about Spectacular Spider-Man 227. So it's chapter 5. I wanted to ask about the cover. Is that supposed to be a top-down shot at Kane on the ground? Or is that him mid-action falling to the ground?
I don't know. I see him on the ground. That's how I see it. But I guess you could see it either way.
So I saw it the other way, and there's only right now where I'm like, oh, is he on the ground? I swear,
I guess
it's been 30 years of me thinking one thing, and I'm like, oh my god, was I wrong?
It looks like there's debris behind him, but then when you look at it, the debris is actually also in front of him. So I don't know now. I thought the dress was white and gold, and now I think the dress is black and blue. So I don't know now.
Okay. I was skipping it. I was skipping ahead, but any other final thoughts about the Spider-Man issue? Because again, we've kind of touched on the best moments, and again, Kane and MJ actually having a conversation for once, far overdue. Because it's usually just him freaking out and showing up and being like, "You're in danger. I'm kidnapping you." So now he's actually having a conversation with her, which is nice. But as you say, it doesn't take much for him to just go on a complete heel turn. But you know what? At least they're starting to feel like we're cleaning up the pieces. Now, by the end, they don't clean up anything. But at least with Kane, we're going to clean up Kane. They don't want this guy running around anymore. So at least we're going to clean up that piece, which is kind of nice.
Sorry, I did Mark of Kane on the camera.
Shit.
That's what he does, right? His whole was just Mark of Caning everything. And now they're like, no, you don't Mark of Kane anymore.
I will say about Spectacular, what's interesting about it is that... You don't see this a lot in the Spider books of the time, but the computer color separations are done by Malibu here. So that is different. So it's the colors by John Calise, but now the separations are being done by a different company. So this is what Brevoort has talked about before, about how you ended up having kind of weird color separations where you'd have someone do the colors and then Malibu would do their own kind of spin on it. You don't see it as evident here, but they are working on it. This is still Sal Buscema and Bill Sienkiewicz. I'm not a big fan of the inks. I've already said that many times. I will say,
Tell us.
on some of the action sequences, they don't bother me. I think they actually heighten it to an interesting level. It's when it's like regular people, like it's when MJ and suddenly her lips are giant and there's too much thatching on the lips, or even that weird shot of Spider-Man with his spider sense as he's carrying Gwen. And he's like, oh, and I'm like, what is the perspective here? Like, some of the artwork is just such a mess. But when it's like costumed characters and not like people, I think it looks fine. But like, there's a shot of the New Warriors here who look like 50-year-olds. Like, they look terrible. They're so aged up. It's not my favorite version of Sal. I've said that a million times and I'll continue to say it as long as we see inks like this. It's just not the right match. My last comment before I'll open it up is, when you have all the clones all falling apart and then you have Ben Reilly just throwing up, what is happening?
It's haunting, right? They go
is.
full, like, clay face. There's this one shot of, like, Kane splutting this one poor clone's face across the page, right? Like, they're just turning to mush as they beat the crap out of these poor, mute spider things, right? I guess, man. And then as the page goes on, like, everything's going a blob, or very, very clay face-esque types of just melting away. And then one of the blobs starts to, like, eat, like, suck in Ben at one point or something at the end. It's
rough.
Wow, it's crazy, right? And can someone put this panel here of Gwen and Mary Jane embracing there? We're going to be really, really close friends. Like, whoa, there's some hot lesbian action about to happen right there. Like, that's like...
But it was nice to see them together because we hadn't seen those two characters occupy a space together. Really, like, I'm trying to remember, like, even in the Clone Saga, were there many shots of MJ in the same room as Gwen? Because I think they were kept apart. So it's interesting to see them together. But you're right, the art definitely skews a certain way that's not super helpful.
Remember this plot line? Remember this guy who was the virus guy who ended up getting powers and they just don't care anymore?
Yeah.
To see a literal the Jackal looking off to the side at an old plot line and going, we don't care. So that was fun.
And then he escapes, right?
Yeah, so what? This is definitely a Splud issue. This is a big old Splud.
Yeah.
Kane goes ham. He sploods all over the place. At one point, just like Sean Baby, no, it's not Sean Baby, it's Maddox, wrote a book or a series of articles about pulp trades or pulp books from like the early 20th century. And there's nothing more defeating of another animal. Nothing makes you more dominant over an animal than what Maddox called beating them with their own kind. And there's often these like jungle kind of themed books of guys fighting off a bunch of weasels by grabbing other weasels and hitting the weasels with the weasels. Or if you can grab a gator and hit other gators with the gator, nothing shows dominance more than that. And so even on page 2, you've got Kane, this is so ridiculous, grabbing a Spider-Man by the heels and using him as a bat to splud other Spider-Mans. He definitely shows he's the strongest clone. He's the best. He's just wrecking house. So that's fun, and the murky inks is okay for that. It hides a lot of the potential other grossness if you were to over-render these emaciated, just blobifying clones. Quite gross. Very almost like Splatterhouse for the TurboGrafx or for the Genesis.
Well, like the death of Kane is like, if without the inks, I think it would be really unsettling and like really bloody. The inks allow you to kind of mask a lot of it, but it's already pretty like gross. Like he's just been run through.
It's a horror comic, which is kind of cool. Like, I think that's where the Sienkiewicz's overwrought inks works well. Like, the cross-hatching on this panel where Ben is looking at this merging together of different globifying clones. You're not alive. You never were. You're only mindless, faceless killing machines. Quite horrific. This has more of a place almost in a Hellboy comic than it does here. So that I enjoy. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the impaling of Kane. And the way you make that more murky, it's very horrific as well. His arms outstretched, almost like he's on a cross. Like there's a lot of good visuals going on there, but in terms of moving any kind of a meaningful plot forward, it's not there, right? It's more banging the toys together.
Yeah.
It's interesting how Peter is like not here, is busy out with Gwen and stuff. Witnessing all these clones turn into these horrific blobs, because it'd be an interesting perspective for him to see, thinking he's a clone, that this may happen to him at some point as part of the degenerative process. Like, that would have been an interesting story beat, if they cared about story at some point, for him to have the aftershocks of it. Like Ben could have mentioned it too at some point. I get it throws up because he's disgusted by it, but he's never thinking back going, oh my god, thank god I'm the real one, because that's going to happen to me. Type of situation in this kind of bloodbath of blobs.
Yeah. It's almost like we spend time on him vomiting, but not really getting inside his head about how he feels. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting choice.
The thing that keeps coming up for me, and I've mentioned as well before, that I dislike is the boxification of MJ. She's constantly relegated to this apartment shot where she's ruminating or stewing or sad because her marriage is actually quite awful and Peter is constantly absent. But they are giving her some things to do. You already mentioned the Gwen thing. This is her sciencing. This is her going, I'm going to try to figure out how to save Peter. I'm going to combine a bunch of the spider locators or trackers, and I'm going to use my personal signal to give him a jolt. And later on, we're also going to see her kind of take on a bit of a role with trying to bring web fluid to Ben. So at least they're giving her a little bit of agency here. But it is sad to see, if you were to put together in this last year or two of Spider-Man comics, all the scenes that show Mary Jane doing anything, most of them would be her in this apartment, and that's kind of sad. But at least there's some movement here with her to break out of that.
Plus, she was reading books on genetics, which was interesting. I wonder what the books on cloning were like in 1995.
Yeah. There was just question marks and enigmatic. They were just no one can say.
So Omega, first of all, I'm so sad that there's not a good scan of the cover, because it's original chromium, right? So in the trade paperbacks, it's very washed out. I don't know if your copies look just as washed out as mine.
Yeah.
Actually, I think mine might actually look worse than yours, Nate. I think you might have a different printing, actually, than mine.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that actually earlier, because you showed a panel, and I was like, that's a different orientation to mine, in terms of what was next to it on the page, but I was very curious by it.
Yeah, so I hate the cover, not a fan of the art for most of this. It's all over the place, though. There's different artists. Some of the rendering is kind of cool, almost Todd McFarlane-esque, even from the get-go.
Yeah.
You've got errant webbing off to the side, which is a very McFarlane-esque kind of thing. Again, back to the battle-damaged, battle-ravaged costume, which is a strong kind of Peter, almost allusion or a reference for Ben. So he's really being positioned as the main Spider-Man, more likable, more heroic, very gritty. And lots of good, again, more Todd McFarlane-esque webbing. So he's taking center stage. And again, the art is not consistent, but there's stuff that I like. Showing the boys another shot of those smokestacks.
Oh yeah,
Ben's in a McFarlane-esque pose. So
I would say
that,
the previous issue, I liked how Gwen was written. Here, I don't recognize this character. This is she's angry. She keeps telling Peter, he's I don't know what to do. And MJ's I'm here with your unborn child. And he's freaking out. And she's just you're like me. Gwen's just saying, you're like me. Just come with me. I'm what is this weird triangle that we're throwing in that doesn't fit? And then she's got a gun at the end. And she's going to kill the jackal. I just don't understand, why they're doing this with her. And I guess the biggest problem that the Glenn Greenberg had with this, who again was the assistant editor at the time, is that they bring her back. They were going to resolve her plot line, and she just walks away at the end. It's not resolved at all. The problem is that this clone of Gwen just exists in the world and has existed since the 1970s, and they finally are going to resolve it. They're going to get rid of her or just do something with her, and she just walks away at the end, and no one cares. And it just doesn't make sense. This is a plot line. Why are you leaving this to dangle? And they never come back to it. Jackal finally dies. And I think when he dies, everyone probably goes, thank God, because we're done with this. Can't we just move on? And the most upsetting part of the issue isn't any of it. The most upsetting part is the last page when he's you can be Spider-Man now. And it's that's too easy an answer. I'm is it? Like, we've been building to this moment. You've made us love Ben. Peter's a mess. Peter says, you're Spider-Man. And Ben says, that's too easy an answer. I'm like, guys, this was the end. Don't do this.
Yeah.
And now we're going to do a whole storyline with Exiled, which is, going to be pushing this out further. We're going to have Time Bomb. We're going to have the greatest responsibility. And when that's over, Peter's going to give the costume to him. And Ben's going to say, all right. And then he's going to spend 2 months being Scarlet Spider in his own book. So we keep getting these moments when they're like, it's over. And then they say, no, not really. And that's frustrating.
Yeah. And Peter's arc should have been a more organic turn. His heel turn should have been organic, and then a transition back, not to necessarily wanting to wear the costume, but to going, hey, I actually use this as an excuse to run from my responsibility. I got scared about the baby. I got scared about maybe irradiating MJ, and I'm going to face my responsibilities. I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to be a good partner. I'm not going to run from my problems anymore. I love you, and let's work it out. Let's go to therapy, whatever it's going to be. Instead, it's all these weird, again, that conversation in the kitchen where this weird Gwen clone all of a sudden is like, hey, I'm barely a real person. I'm packing heat. Also, you should run away from your unborn child and your wife because they're not clones. Just remember, we're the same, you and I. She's not like us. She's not a clone. And Peter just goes, you're right. I am different. Bye, MJ. So he's very unlikable. And they don't really spend the time to redeem him. It's an interesting move, the solidarity between clones. I kind of dig that, actually, but it's not done well. Like, it's done much better, of course, in X-Men comics with, like, the Morlocks and then, like, the next generation of Morlocks with Marrow later on, where there are these angry people who are connected by the way the world hates and fears them. The world doesn't really know about clones, but all we know here is that it either takes almost nothing at all to get you to join this movement of clone solidarity.
Yeah.
And apparently they have to do this because they're so different from normal humans, because they're clones and they might degenerate, but she hasn't degenerated in 5 years, and Peter hasn't degenerated in 5 years, and Kane kind of has, so it's bad. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so there's no resolution really to that arc. He has a conversation with MJ at the end in the bedroom, and then it should have been, I'm hanging up the webs when he goes to bed, just like you said. But instead he goes, nah, I'm going to put my costume back on. I still have the power. Life has dealt me a new responsibility. I'm going to still be Spider-Man. So it absolutely kind of jumps ship. It abdicates its responsibility to tie together these threads. And instead, like you said, the books were selling too well, and editorial was doing that big old stretch it out. And they did. And we're about to get a mixture of some good things and a lot of just time wasters.
I will say most of what comes after this is still going to be better, because I think this is probably the worst, because it just felt most fluffy. Like, it didn't feel thought out. And there's a lot of repetition, like we've talked about. And, like, even Spider Side, like, they build this guy up, and he, like, gets, dropped off a build. Like, basically, they're falling off a building. Jackal ends up getting saved, but not Spider Side. He cuts the web, right? Yeah, and so it hits the ground. But, like, we've seen this guy reform from, like, just a head. So, like, why is that suddenly enough? Now, eventually, he does come back in, Spider-Man... I don't know, something, I can't remember what it's called now, but JMD, I think a few years ago, did a Ben Reilly Spider-Man story set when Ben Reilly is Spider-Man. I believe he used Spider-Side there because, the character's not really dead. Like, he's dead, but, like, not in a believable way, and it's so offhanded, like, it doesn't matter. Like, even Exiled, for all its issues, which is the next storyline we'll talk about next month, I think has a lot more going for it. Like, it's more fun. Even though it's just...
Yeah, no, it is.
It's just kicking the football down, kicking the ball down the field a bit, and it's not actually getting you anywhere, but at least it's more fun. Whereas this felt like, we are going to give you something big. We're going to build something up, and then it just doesn't deliver, and there's just weird stuff. Like, as we talked about in, Chapter 5... we didn't need to see the New Warriors again. They're there just to mention, that guy from the first chapter is, like, gone now, and then he shows up with the Jackal, but then nothing really happens with that either. Like, it's just plot lines for no reason that don't add anything. It makes it very aggravating to read.
Yeah, so I'm glad you had us read it.
I mean, we got to experience it all, like the good and the bad. Like, here's the thing. Once Ben becomes Spider-Man, the book is fun. Like, it's enjoyable. Now, it's not long enough, but that period, even when they bring Peter back and they're starting to get back into the complexity and the overly convoluted things, it's still fun because Ben is fun. And by then, Ben and Peter are friends. They're brothers. So once we've moved past this, I hate you because I'm garbage and like I don't know who I am, once we move past that, the characters are really fun together. And they have interesting interplay. We just don't get to see that here at all. And now Kane's off the board for a while. That's not forever either. So obviously, like, you know, this is not the end. So I'm excited to talk about what comes next.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely, the goal has always been for me to, again, I haven't read all these issues before, so this is good for me. And once I can kind of get through this part, and I think by doing this as a group of Spider Boys, it's pushing me in that direction. But I just can't wait to get to the Ben stuff when he's in costume, and I feel more and more in my life now like an ability to connect to him and his new journey and stuff like that in a way that even as a teen I thought was cool, but I saw through different eyes. So I am definitely ready for my reintroduction to a character I have very strong memories of, or favorable memories of enjoying and reading. And he's my Spider-Man. That's how I describe him still. And I can't wait to go read through all those issues and see if he's still my Spider-Man, my preferred Spider-Man.
I think he still will be.
Yeah, because we're Ben heads.
We are Ben heads, you know, because, well, it was, you know, if you survive the Clone Saga, like it's interesting how they branded it, right, when they put it in the trades initially, because you had the complete Clone Saga and then the completely Ben Reilly epic. And it's an interesting distinction that I don't think needs to be there, but it's definitely intriguing that they did decide to do it that way.
And the epics are like, whatever. You get the Clone Saga as Volume 1, and then we're just going to do a bunch of storylines, so it'll be different for people reading hereafter. And again, the collections are certainly better. The paper quality is better. But it's good that I'm getting to read through these original printings now, because I will be retiring them soon for my epics.
And one question that I have as we go on, and I don't know if I've really decided this, and maybe I'll talk with you guys as well, like offline afterwards, but, you know, Ben's going to be in New Warriors a bit, but like not a lot and not playing a huge role. Is that something we want to continue to cover?
Aren't his issues all covered in the epics?
They are in the epics, but that doesn't mean we have to cover them, because they're very tangential. Like, if you're looking at the Clone Saga, I would argue that they're not really integral. But if you want to see more of Ben, then we can read more New Warriors. And if you were intrigued by your glimpse into the New Warriors here, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, I mean, Zerker, when I know he's not, I flipped ahead, and I don't think he's on all the issues, but I mean, when he's there, he's enjoyable. And of course, there's the Green Goblin issue where he sees Ben, so we should talk about that, right? Where he meets Scarlet Spider.
I mean, you can't stop me from talking about the Green Goblin.
Great. I mean, I don't know why we haven't done... That's got to be Book of the Month next time, right? We just got to get Paul to read them all.
Oh my God!
I would love.
Do you think he would like it?
Those. I mean, he likes Nightwing, and McDaniel drew Nightwing, and there's lots of good guest artists. Stars, at least at the beginning, right? You've got the Hobgoblin, and you've got Scarlet Spider, and you get to see the Rhino in there. So, and Joystick, everyone's favorite '90s Spider-Man villain. I would love to read that with you guys. I would love to revisit that.
Well, then we should.
It was only Onslaught, for goodness sake.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah, I'd be curious, like, when we should do that. But I guess we could talk to Paul, see how he feels about that one issue and say, okay,
yeah, sure, yes.
Do you want to read more of this? Like, about the character now because you've seen him twice in Spider-Man, in Web of Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man. So do we want to see more of this character? And we're going to be like, yeah, we should do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he'll love the Maximum Spider scene, right? In this issue 3, right, where he's pounding from all angles the villain. So maybe that'll be enough to have him go intrigued. I love the Daredevil issue. I think it's issue 4, right? Where I guess
I should mention for listeners, we did lose Paul 10 minutes ago. He did have to go to another engagement. We were in the middle of like a diatribe, so he just kind of bounced and like gave us a signal. And like I've listened to other podcasts where someone will leave, and usually they say like, "Oh, I got to bounce now," and there was nothing like that. So if you're like just wondering why Paul's so quiet, he left like 10 minutes ago.
He could come back and also be quiet, and we would never hear he entered.
This is true.
He could be here now.
Yeah, that's very Paul. Any final thoughts about what I made you read?
What we were just subjected to. I still want, in one of our road trips, I got to pick up an issue of Alpha. I got to, just for the ridiculous cover alone.
It's great.
It's a crazy cover.
There's
it's no more than a buck.
I will say there is great art in here. Like, there's some really fantastic art. Like, I will say a lot of the story, because it goes just punchy a lot, it's easily read in terms of it. You go by it pretty fast because it's not giving you a lot of depth. There's just a lot of, like, the same, as we said, a lot of the same beats, a lot of the same punchies, but the artists do a good job of portraying it. So at least from an artistic perspective, like, it's not unenjoyable. Although I will say, like, you know, Omega has 4 artists. There's too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen. It's inconsistent. So you get some really good moments and also some bad ones. Like the moment of Jackal, you know, hitting the ground and being dead, I think is laughable. I don't think it has any kind of pathos. He looks like a extremely comic booky villain, and not. There's just no gravity to it or reality to the situation. As I mentioned, even the death of Spider-Side is barely on panel. Like it reminds me of the death of Doppelganger, but like even worse. Like at least Doppelganger got like a page where he was kicked in the face, fell, and you see him splat. This was more of almost just like a silhouette. So it didn't really feel like you got anything from it.
My mileage varies a bit different than that. I mean, I like the obviously Bagley, Lyle. I think the Butler book is something's going on there. Either he's rushed or the inks are overdone or whatever it is. So I like Butler normally. I really like some upcoming Butler stuff that he'll do in Exile. But for me, it's almost like in the 90s with X-Men books, often when the story might lag or you're not into it, you've got like one of the Kubrick brothers, you know, or you've got Joe Mad. So even like a really kind of terrible story when Joe Mad's drawing it, I'm like, it's like, I don't know, I'm just glossing over it all and really vibing with that energy here. Whereas this is a bit uneven for me. And again, Lim is not a strong Spider-Man. I actually like Lim better even when he draws Venom. Like, so there's something about him in other books that I prefer. So again, it's just like a taste thing. You're not wrong, but this is not my favorite art. This is not a good enough art for me that I want to get all these issues. I'll probably get the Lyle issue and I'll get Alpha just for the cover alone.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Lyle did amazing work there. Like and even at the end of Omega, like he did that the last couple pages when you have Spider-Man swinging out to go see Ben. Like that's a great shot of Spider-Man. Like that's a great Lyle. Even him, you know, Ben kind of ruminating and then Spider-Man showing up. Like that's good stuff. It is funny when I see them.
I like him with MJ. Like I like that. Like they care about each other and they look like they're having an intimate moment. And I don't know, it's just. Even the way he makes like MJ look at him, she looks like she loves him, which I don't know why she does, but like
after this,
it feels like they're yeah, exactly.
And we're not done, right? Like Time Bomb is probably like for their relationship, probably the bottom. Like it's pretty bad. I mean, he already slapped her, right? Like or like knocked her away from him after he found out he was a clone, which was not great either. But yeah, I mean,
she recontextualizes that, right? She does in these issues. There's if I'm not mistaken, I'm not reading ahead, right? It is in one of these issues.
I think
where
you're right.
Like, she's ruminating. Peter didn't mean to hit me. It was an instinctual reaction. He kind of swiped during a fight and didn't know it was me, which I know harder to buy because he literally has a spider sense that warns him of danger and stuff. But fine, whatever. He was overwhelmed. So they are trying to kind of like, this is not a Pym moment. This is not a Pym Janet Ben White moment.
Yeah, but it's hard to read. It's hard to read that though because it also just feels like it's a male writer writing a female character justifying the actions of her abuser. Right. Like that's what it comes down to, and that's hard to read.
I don't like it.
Like it's none of it's good, right? Like it paints Peter in such a bad light. And he's our hero, right? And we don't want to see him that way. And, like, I understand what their thought process was. And also part of the problem is that you have Buscema who does big action moments, right? So it just felt bigger than maybe it could have and by AI. And it just feels very problematic. And as you said,
totally
this relationship already kind of sucks right now. Like, they've been going through so much.
Right.
And then there's this physical assault. And whether or not he meant to or not, she still gets hit. And she's, instead of understanding what she's thinking, she's only worried about him and about how he might feel about it, and trying to excuse what he did and get him off the hook. And that's, which I guess is really for the reader, but not for her, because the reader needs him to be off the hook, because we don't want to not like him.
Right, it's all over the place. You want to not like him so you're not upset that Peter isn't Spider-Man anymore, but then you also should want them to go off into the sunset and be happy for them, because you don't want them to have a really problematic marriage and then they're going to go off together and have these adventures that you're like, I'm not comfortable with that. But then she's been written in a way to let him off the hook, to not address what happened, and that makes it worse. And also you don't like him, but also maybe we shouldn't kind of send them off the book this way until we resolve it. It's pulling in these different directions of like him, like her, don't like her. The writers don't really seem to know what they want to do and how they want to do this. And again, like, Claremont is kind of like a model here. He goes, hey, Madeline and Scott's going to finally get the ending that he wanted. The love of his life had to die. I'm going to give him basically a clone, which she wasn't a clone at first, but she became a clone of Jean, and they can go off into the sunset. He's paid his dues. He's done everything he can. He sacrificed his life for the X-Men. They're going to have a kid together. We want them to be happy. And that was his way of retiring that character. And people were kind of at first going, I wish Cyclops was back. But it was still a nice send-off. Mm-hmm. And we have that model. And then Marvel reversed it. And they're like, bring the original X-Men back. So editorial again coming in here. It's just history repeating itself. But they're not sending MJ and Peter off in as nice of a way as Claremont was able to do.
Yeah. Whew. Well, you know what? We're past it. We're past maximum clonage. We survived.
All right, past the nadir.
We survived the experience.
Okay, so onward and upward for better times. Then.
That's right. Well, again, thank you so much for being part of this Book of the Month Club, Nate. It's always a joy. We enjoyed having Paul as well, even though we had to bounce early. For those who are listening, you can email me at comicshenanigans@gmail.com. Rate the show on Apple Podcasts. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify and various other podcasting platforms. So thanks again for listening to this episode. Next month, we'll be back with another Book of the Month Club. Upcoming episodes, in between then, we have Chris Caruso coming back on the show to talk about the kind of somewhat surprising return of mini Marvels, as there's been more strips coming over the past few years. He at one point thought that it was probably done, but he wasn't done, and he's doing more. He's also doing some variant covers for the X Office and Venom Office, so we'll talk to him about that. We have Andrew Peapoy coming back for his second interview. We only got up to about 2000 last time, so we're going to talk about the last 20 years on our upcoming episode. And we're also going to have, at least this is tentatively scheduled to have an episode with Chaz Bauer, who wrote a controversial new book called Stan Lee Lied. It's a bit of a rough go if you love Stan Lee, but definitely has a very specific bent to it. There's definitely some truth as far as we can tell from the writings, but it's definitely at times inflammatory. So if you're a big fan of Stan Lee, you probably don't want to read that book. Anyways, that is some of the upcoming episodes. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.